Hey there everybody and welcome back. In today's video I'm going to be walking you through the Tyler Talks mobile app as well as how I built this application. So the first part of this video is showing you the application itself, the functionality that it has. So this is essentially me screen sharing my phone on the right hand side, and then on the left hand side here we have the application in Appgyver. Now, before we get started, I do want to let you know I'm going to walk you through how to build out every bit of functionality in this application. It has some unique features. For example, these images are not embedded in the app. They are stored in Firebase storage, and then the link to the image is used in a Firebase database. So the idea is I can swap these images out without needing to essentially upload or re-upload the application itself. Now, one thing I want to note is I'm going to be covering how to store these icons outside of this application. I did try to submit this application as it stands, or as it stands in this video, to the Apple App Store, and it did get rejected for not meeting their store guidelines. So just wanted to preface this video by letting you know that if you have your app icons or any core features or functions of the app, there is a strong chance that it will get rejected by Apple because it doesn't appear to be, I believe they use phrasing along the lines of a native application. So for example, if your images are not stored in the app itself and they're rendered from a database, then the app, when it loads, is going to be missing icons as they're essentially being generated or rendering. So it may make it appear to be like a website or a web page that loads slowly. So the workaround for this is you can select your icon, and instead of using a formula that pulls it from a URL, you can make it a static image. So you can choose source, and then you can choose static image, and then click this button and choose it from the directory within your device. Just make sure you're managing the size of the application accordingly. If you're using some very high quality images, they will take up more size, and I believe most of the app stores do have some kind of a size restriction. So also I wanted to make a note. So the Apple guidelines, you can look at the developer website. So I believe it's developer.apple.com. You'll see that they have a ton of different guidelines that you have to meet to get your application to essentially meet their deadlines to go in the App Store. So Apple is much pickier than Google. So for example, the application I'm going to be covering and how I made this in this video was approved by Google Play, but not by Apple. So I did have to go back and change the icons. So just make a note that if you do have your icons loaded elsewhere or any core features or functions of the app, it is possible they could get rejected. However, Apple does give you the ability to communicate with them via your developer account. So it is possible to overcome this. But I did just want to let you know that you need to bear in mind that you need to follow Apple and Google Play and any other app store's policies when you're creating your application and while you're uploading, just to make sure that your app actually gets in first time around. And then in the second part of the video, I'm going to be showing you how I actually created this application using this coffee roasting forum. So this is essentially the Coffee Canine app. If you're familiar with my channel, you've seen the how to create a social or sharing app playlist. This is the app I'm going to be using as a sample, so I don't have to give out public API keys for all of the information in my app itself. Now, before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe and check out the channel for new content. Now, you can check out the pricing page yourself. Again, Appgyver, you'll see here, it's free for those that are essentially indie developers making, I believe it's 10 million or less. I always like to show or at least mention that. So it's a great resource, and this application, I'll put links in the description. It's available in Google Play and the Apple App Store. Now, let's go ahead and jump in. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the channel for new content. And we're going to jump into the app itself. So I've had a couple of different requests. So I have requests for different videos, people asking to help them build apps, things of that nature. So this application is my way of creating more of like a collaborative space where you can get a hold of me without actually having me give out all of my personal information. So in the app itself, we'll go through each of these very quickly. So you have services. These are my services that are currently on Fiverr. Clicking on either of these two, these are basically just your image list items right here. If you select these, then it will give you the ability to just open up the Fiverr page within your apps or within your device's mobile browser or just native browser. And you can purchase the mock interview or resume writing service. There will be more added over time. The YouTube one, as you could imagine, it's just the list preview with different playlists. So I have my how to make an app without coding. So this playlist is available right here. and you have just my general Tyler Talks channel. Most of these playlists are content that I've made myself. This religious content playlist is a different one, though. This is content from other people that I really enjoyed. So being religious myself, being Christian, this is something that I wanted to share. But the other playlists are typically going to be content I've made. Appgyver tutorials, for example. Now, we also have professional development. So we have sample interview questions. So I loved this one. So the idea here is this is probably one of my favorite features because these are stored in a Firebase database elsewhere. The idea is these are essentially going to be like flashcards. Now, I know that this application doesn't have the greatest UX or UI design right now. I'm still working on that as well. But the idea for this page here is if you select an interview question, you could treat it like a flashcard. So for example, if I was going to say, what made you want to apply here? I can just kind of decide and kind of rehearse with someone or just myself. And then when I want to see like a sample answer, I can click it and you'll see question, sample answer, things to consider. So some really cool content there. And again, I'll be adding more over time. We have Contact Us. This is a web preview with a Google Forms link. Pretty simple stuff there. Then we have the technology section, which just has technology playlist available on YouTube. So these are videos that I've made. The request video is designed to be your area to request videos or specific content. So you'll see I have the top requests I have here. Most of these are from people posting comments in other videos, but you'll have name, email, video description, etc. And I note in all of my contact forms, email address is not required, but if you provide it, then you're okay. You're essentially saying or acknowledging that you're okay with me reaching out. We have app building. This is a few different playlists, and there could be some misspellings throughout this app. I'm still working on it again, but it's just to get this out to you all. So you have how to make a social app. So this is my playlist. It's a pretty in-depth playlist of how to create an app start to finish that has a social or sharing component. Appgyver tutorials. Then we have making this app, where I'm going to remove this video and put the video I'm actually recording now once it's finished. You have fitness. This is going to have more content over time. It's just a playlist for fitness content. And then we have product reviews. So I'm not a huge fan of how this piece looks right here. It's a mobile preview like the others. However, it's a little bit smaller. I'm going to try to make this look a bit more aesthetically appealing. But the idea is for those of you who want a specific product or service review, instead of a general video, you can drop some content here, like what do you want the review to be about, and then that way you can submit your information to me. And then we have my product and service review playlist. And then lastly, there is About Us. So this content here is stored in a Firebase database, so I can update this without updating the app. What this means is if you're on the app itself, so this content right here, if I changed this, because it's stored within the app itself, I would have to republish the app to the app stores. It's kind of an annoying process when you could just store the information in Firebase and then reference it in your app, which I'll show you how to do shortly. Just makes it a lot easier to update. Then lastly, we have the site and then various policies. Now, I do want to note that these websites will probably change over time. I just needed a URL with the content, so I went with some free sites for now, but I'll probably be changing the URLs and content over time, but just gives you a general idea there. So that's the idea of the video. So I'm going to break it down now into a couple of core concepts we're going to be covering. First and foremost is the icons and the setup, because I haven't really seen anything on Appgyver currently, although there could be or could be something coming up, but I haven't really seen anything for like a traditional home page. So some of the other app builders out there may provide you with a template of here's a circular ring, fill out the icons, make them what you want. But Appgyver does give you the way to create it. You just have to be a little creative. So we're going to cover this layout. I'm going to cover how I got these icons to show up and essentially get them separate from Appgyver itself. So basically how to do the database storage. And then I'm not going to cover any kind of uploading data, just more so how to transfer text. And then lastly, we're going to cover the web previews and really just any other additional features. So let's go ahead and jump in. So creating the actual layout itself, to keep everything centered, I just dragged a row over. So if you don't know how to use Appgyver too much right now, check out in the description, I'll put a link to a general Appgyver tutorial that I've made, and also check out their YouTube channel. They got some really interesting content, but the idea is that'll cover how to use the Appgyver interface a bit more. But for those of you that know, you basically just drop the row over, and then when you click on style, you'll see you have all the style options here, and you can just click to add an additional cell. So I have 3 cells now. And you'll see this is a 3 by 3, so I have 3 rows of 3 cells. So basically, if you scroll over here, you can see that this is cell 1, cell 2, cell 3 of this row. If you click on the row and hit Control-C, Control-V, you can copy and paste it, and now we have our 3 by 3. These will change as you add images to them. If you ever have any issues with images not working right, or you're just having some confusion about getting things set up, don't be scared to just delete the row and start over. Sometimes you have to do that. So that covers how to get this 3 by 3. And then getting the actual content in was pretty simple as well. So the idea here is this content stored in Firebase storage. So here's an example. I have the Coffee Canine app pulled up here. If we go to storage, you'll see that we have a couple of images. To do this, you'll just create your Firebase account. So you basically just go to firebase.com, create a general account. Pretty simple. I have a couple of tutorials in my Appgyver playlist as well if you have questions on that. But the idea here is you go to storage. You may have to open the storage account if you haven't already created one, but this is free and it scales. So the more you use, the more you pay. And then you just upload your file, and then your file will be sitting here. So this is a Grounds and Hounds. It's a brand of coffee. This is just a random image that I put with a Grounds and Hounds logo. It's not their content, so to speak. But you'll see when you click on the images, you'll have the URL here. So you can just right click and click Copy Link Address. You can paste this into a web browser, but you'll see that it'll bring you just to the image where it's stored. So you can copy this address. I have all of these, although I pulled them from unsplash.com, and I tried to give people credit. When you click on an image, you'll typically see the credits down here. But the idea here is I stored all of these in Firebase in case the URL from unsplash.com changes. So if they change that URL and then the picture's still there, it'll break it in your app. So I downloaded the image and then just tried to give credit where I could. So this URL is what you would store in your application. So I'm going to go basically just page by page to walk you through within this Coffee Canine app how I did it. So what we're going to do is we're going to enter in a new page, and we're just going to call this Home 2. So first thing I did for my app was I just put, here is the official app of the Tyler Talks channel. Now, if you want to change this and center it, you can click on Style, change the style, and then Layout. I believe it's under Layout, and you can center. And then you can put your content up top, so Tyler Talks. And let's just say we want to center that as well. And again, we're using a completely different application just so I can keep API keys and everything separate. So now we want to adjust the layout and get this bluish color. So we'll just click on Page Layout, App Background, and we'll choose this blue color. And you'll see it's already coming together a little bit. Now we're going to bring over row, row, and row. And this is going to help us to get this 3 by 3 layout, essentially. So now that we've brought these rows over, we just need to add an additional cell. So you can change cell width and styling. I'm just going to click on a cell and then just select the plus button just to basically add a new cell. So now we have a 3 by 3 layout. Now, the thing that I find is easiest is I like to copy and paste because it gives you, instead of having to drop an image in, so I'll show you what it looks like. If we drop an image in right now, it looks fine, but it does resize the other items in the cell, and depending on your image size, it could change things up quite a bit. So what we need to do is we need to make this image available elsewhere. So what I mean by that is your choices are you can choose a static image and upload your image to the app, which over time does increase your app's size, or you can store them in Firebase, where essentially the application is going to be set up and it'll store the image elsewhere, meaning there's no size increase or minimal size increase to your app. The downside to this is it requires an internet connection. So you're going to be much more reliant on some kind of mobile or some mobile data or Wi-Fi, but it is something worth noting that is an option. So now what we need is we need to change sizing, and we need to get an actual image. So we're going to pick this image here, and we're going to right click on this, and we're going to copy link address. So this is where the image is stored in Firebase. Then we're going to go to Firestore database, and you'll see I already have quite a few set up. So we're just going to start a collection, and we're going to call this icons to make it easy to remember. And then you can have different documents if you want, but this is not something that we're going to need to have to use as like a repeated value or anything. So I'm just going to call it icons again. And then we will put a couple of fields. So I'm going to put, you could name it any way you want. I could just put top left. And then the value will be the URL. And then the next field could be middle, top right, whatever's easiest for you to remember which icon is where. I also did icon credits. So you would put this, and then if you wanted to, you could put icon downloaded from Unsplash by, and then you just put the name of the person who uploaded it. And then the field, let's just say, if you want to add any other content, maybe top right. So this would be the next icon. But we're just going to do one to make it a little easier. And we will click Save. So now we have this icons with these fields. So we'll jump back over to here, and we're going to save the progress so far. Now we have to add a data variable. Now I have a ton here already. So what I like to do in this, I'll show you how this works to make it a little bit easier for you. But if we click on app images, here's how the data variables work. You'll name it, provide a description, and then the resource URL should be this almost always. Now you can go to docs in Firebase to open up the pages, and you can actually search for this. I'll put this in the description as well. But what I like to do is, just to show you how I copy and paste things to make them quicker, I copy this and I paste it up here, and I do not hit enter. And then I come down here and I copy this and I paste it in, and then I just Control A, Control X. The idea there is I now have all of this content. So I can go copy this and then make the changes. Instead of app images, it'll be whatever. Now you can typically see the URL up here. So I'm going to walk you through what this looks like. If we paste this in and we put icons, because that's the actual document ID, you'll see this is what it returns. So it looks a little messy, but luckily Appgyver helps us to clean it up. But you'll see here we have URL, the actual icon credit, and then the icon URL. So it's pretty cool setup. So what this is doing is this is showing us what this looks like and the URL to get to it. So here's how you can get your own URL. You'll see that this part should be the same, firestore.googleapis.com/v1, etc. And then if you click over here and we click on icons, you'll see it looks pretty similar. The only difference is U-2. So we'll see it's projects, Coffee Canine, databases, default, documents, icons. Mostly the same here, minus this last part. So it's a little bit different. So I'll show you exactly how to get it, but the idea is this part will be the same for you. It'll be /projects, /the project name, /databases, /default in parentheses, /documents, /icons, which is basically the directory to get to this. So again, this will be in the description, and I'll just put in here, for example, I'll put document name in all caps so you know what to replace and what not to. So we now need to grab this information. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll copy this, and then I'm going to jump over here, and we're going to add a data resource. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to put REST API direct integration, just because I prefer this method personally, but if you want to set up the Firebase setup, you can yourself. Here we're going to put in, let's just put icons. Short description, icons for the app. And then we're going to paste in the URL, and we're going to cut off this part. So it's up to v1. And then in the get tab, we'll paste the rest. And then the response key path is documents. and we'll go to test, run test, and you'll see we get that content from earlier. And when we click set schema from response, this is what helps Appgyver to understand what is what. So you'll see in just a second how Appgyver helps us to clean it up. So now what we can do is we've added our data variable. Now I'm not going to do it for each of these 10 icons here, but just to let you know, you can go into icons now that you've added it, and you can add a new field. So let's just say this is test and test. Now you're going to notice that this isn't going to show up in Appgyver immediately. So here's how you do what I would call like a Firebase refresh. If you go to data and you go to this test tab again for your data resource and you click run test, you'll see that it now has the new test section. So if Appgyver doesn't seem like it's updating, it's because it's grabbing the information that you submitted previously. So every time you add a new field, if you want to see that content in Appgyver, you just hit run test and set schema from response and save. This will update the content in Firebase in Appgyver. So now we're going to add this image as an icon. So we are going to go to formula and we'll click in here. And we're just going to go to data variables. Now you'll see there are no data variables available. So this is the one piece you need to remember because this is page by page. You move this slider across and then you go down to data variables and you click add, and there will be one of these for each of the variables you've added. We have icons here and we're just going to click save. I know that seems very simple, but this basically just tells us that that's on this page. Now the image did disappear. It's still there. It's just not rendering in the app, which is not a problem. So we're just going to click the image from the tree over here and we'll click source. And then we're going to go to formula again and we'll delete all of that content. And now we're going to go to data variables and you'll see we now have all of these. So what we're looking for is it's always going to be a string value. What this means is we're looking for the actual text for that specific thing, so to speak. So you'll see we have the icon credits. If you clicked on icon credits, you're not going to get anything. You'll see that it looks correct, but it's not. So the string value is only the text. So we are basically looking for the top left. So you'll see we have top left, and here we have the string value. So we double click this and click save and save. And you'll see now the icon appears. So we can just click save. Now you can repeat this process for the other cells and then simply swap out the data resource here by going to data variables. If you delete this and go to data variables, and then you would just do the string value for the top right. Now, I don't actually have any content there, so it's not going to render an image, but that's the idea. All of the fields here would have unique URLs, and then you have the image. Now, if you want to get really creative, you have a couple of choices. So I'm going to walk through this just once, but we're just going to put in a variable for height and width, depending on how complicated you want it to be. And I'll show you the purpose for this. Now you could set this up as a single variable or multiple. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So right now, these images are kind of big, and you have to think. You don't know exactly how this is going to behave on all the different device types. So one person may have a Galaxy S20, someone could have a Galaxy S9, someone could have a brand new iPhone. It's going to interact differently based on resolution and how those devices handle it. So I set all of my icons to a specific height and width. The downside of doing that is you can't adjust it without an update to the app. So if you get a bunch of users complaining at once, you're going to have to go re-upload it and then wait for Google Play and the Apple App Store to okay it. So this way is a little bit easier. So what we're doing now is we're going to go and we're going to select an image, and then we are going to go down. You have a couple of choices. You have advanced, and you can do min and max width and height, or you can choose exact size. And when you click exact size, we can go to formula and bind it. So if you remember, we just made a change in Firebase. So we have to go back and go to test, run the test again to get those new values, set schema, and save. Now, I'm sorry if I'm going a little quickly, but between this and the other videos I have, hopefully this is muscle memory now, or it's getting to be for you all as well. But now that we've saved that, we can go to formula and you'll see there's an unsupported binding for this, unfortunately. So we can work around by going to advanced and going to minimum width. And we will just choose data variables, and then we have to go find the height. And that's actually, we're in the width section, so we would need width. And then I'm going to copy this because we're going to paste it in the next one as well. And this is probably not the best way to use this, just for your information, but just showing you an example. Now we're going to do the minimum height, and we're going to do the same thing, but we're just going to type in height. And this is the string value, so it's just returning the value 75. It's the same thing as typing in pixels 75. So you'll see that now we have a 75 by 75 pixel image. So the idea here is, and what I love about this, is you now have a single image that is 75 by 75, and you can do that for all of these, so you can adjust the size of the image from Firebase. So the idea here is, this is 75 by 75. If I go in here and I change this to 85, it may not change it here because you'll need to do the data test set schema from response again, but it will still show up in your application itself. So really, really cool way to do that. Now, you'll see that we have all of these options here. So I've walked you through, you just repeat this process. So the idea here is you would repeat this by doing exactly what we just did for those various cells. So I'm going to click in this cell and paste the image. Click in this cell. Looks like it's being a little slow, so we'll paste it in cell 2, and then we'll paste it in cell 3. So I'm going to delete this first row because it looks like doesn't look too great. And then that's really all that there is to it for this particular home screen. So the idea here is you have this 3-column row, and you would just replace all of these images with the data variable for whatever image you're looking to add. If you want them to be hard-coded in your app, you'll just select the image, and then you'll go in and you change the source to the static image, and you would choose it from your local device and upload it. So it's entirely your choice, but that's how we got this icon layout. And then I just added text underneath each. So you add the text, you change the style. So I would make it, let's just say you wanted it to be a different label, and you wanted to adjust the size. Now mine, the text is a little bit closer. So you can actually, I'll show you the dimensions. So I have my icon here, and this does require you to play around a bit, and there's a -25 pixel bottom gap. And then there's the text itself that has a -25 pixel top gap and 0 bottom gap. That's how I was able to get the icon that close to the text without any padding. But you may need to play around with that and test it on some devices to see what works best for you. But that is how we at least got this home screen set up here. Now let's walk through some of the various pages. All right, so the next thing that we would need to do is set up individual pages for these icons to actually take us to. So if you click in the top left here, you're going to see that we have the name of our current page, so home 2. We can just click to add a new page, and we're just going to call this test. And we click OK, and we now have the test page. So you have to click save before you navigate away. And then basically we're going to go back over to home 2. Now, as you can tell, because this application has a lot of pages, it can get a little bit confusing if you don't name them appropriately. And to be honest, I still get lost quite a bit in this application. So I would recommend not only making sure that you're naming things well in the beginning, but if possible, try to minimize the number of pages. I'll show you a couple of workarounds for this. So this is home 2. Now let's jump over to our test page. And let's just say we want it to be this services page. So I'm going to show you how to actually build out 85% of this application here. So what we're going to do first is change the layout. So we will change the background and make it that blue color. And then we can change the text up top to say, we'll just put stuff. And then you can change styling. I really like symmetry, so I'm going to keep it centered. And then we'll just put here, what did I say? So below our services that I offer. So I'm just going to put, check out the links below. And then we will center this as well. All right, so we have the beginning of the page. Now, what we would need to do in services is it's just these two specific large image items, some text, a line, and text. So what we'll do here is we will go down here and we're going to add in a large image list item, a large image list item. Then we will add in some text. Then we will add in a divider. And then lastly, we will add in the last bit of text. Now we would need to change these, so we'll just put service 1. And then in the text, we'll put here is the service. And then we'll click on the second one and we'll put service 2. And here is the second service. Now, if you want to edit these a little bit more, you can actually click this pencil icon and it'll give you the option to edit the image and the container and choose some additional styling options. So just a cool shortcut for you. So we have these two set up and then we have the text here. So we'll just put here is the extra text. Now, obviously it doesn't look the exact same, but the idea is we have the top header. Check out the links below, which would be this text here. Our two list items, some text, a divider, and this text here. So for this text, we're going to change the style to make it this secondary label so that it has that look. And then I'm not going to edit this. You can just basically just have the understanding that this text here would normally be here. So for this text, the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you how I set up my icon credits. That way I can change the icons and images, but also give credit to the people that create them on Unsplash. So we're going to go to our variables because we're on a different page now. So now we have to add not an app variable, we have to go down to the data variables. And you'll notice that data variable for icons is no longer there because we're on a new page. So we just select it and click Save. And then we can click on this right here. And this is going to work anytime there's a value or content, or at least most of the time. So you can click on this content button and click on formula. So these are basic options. You can bind your content. So if we click formula, and this will look familiar, we're going to do what we did before. So data variables, and then icon credits, we have the string value. So we're going to double click and click save and save. And you'll see the text has changed to icon downloaded from Unsplash by, which should sound familiar because that's what we put here. So it's pulling that content in for you. Now you could do that for content here as well. So what I love is this makes the app more dynamic. The more variables that you store in Firebase, the more content that you can edit outside of Appgyver. And Appgyver is a really easy platform to use. But again, the idea is if you wanted to change some of this content now, do you really want to have to change and publish an update every single time that you realize, oh, I misspelled this word here, I need to go change it? You probably don't. So this is just something that could help. Now, another thing to note here, we don't have any images set up. So we have the primary and secondary labels. Let's go to image source. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy that same image over. So if we go to image source, formula, we'll delete all of this and go to data variables again and data icons. So you'll see we are just looking for the one that we had before. So basically we're just looking for that picture. That way we can bring it over. So we have the top left is the one that we're looking for. And we're just going to copy that. And now we have that picture. And then we have the picture down here. So we are just going to go to formula and we will paste in so we have the same image. So the idea here is now it's starting to look a lot better. It's looking a little cleaner now that we have some images added. So we will save. Now, bear in mind again that the more you create your app and make it dependent on Firebase, the more dependent it's going to be and the harder it's going to be. So for example, with the icons at the home screen, I don't know what's going to happen if that device doesn't have a mobile internet connection and if it's not caching those images. So if the image is what you need to click to get to a new page, but the image doesn't load, then users may not be able to get away from the home page. So you just need to bear that in mind when you're creating your app. Do you want it to be 100% on the device, or do you want some of it to be available elsewhere? So we have two options here. So I'm going to show you in a quick run how we're going to get this to set up to open up another page. So we have our application right here. Now what we can do is we can click on this and have it open up a new page that has a web preview full screen, or we can have it open up the page within this page. So here's the difference. We're going to go create one more page and we'll just call it web. And we're going to delete the content on this page. And we will go and find, you may need to install the component. So if you go to component market and we type in the text web, we have two options. First one is a web view. Second option is the date picker calendar. We're going to go to the web view and click install. And then you'll see it shows up in the installed section. So if we drag this over, we can put in a URL. So I have my channel pulled up here. And I will put this in this URL. And then you can just click save. Now, this will not make this full screen, so we have a couple of choices to make this full screen. So what we will do is we're going to go over to the Tyler Talks app, and I'm going to show you what it looks like for full screen if we have any components here. So if you ever need to, you can hover your mouse over when you have a smaller number, and you should be able to load them. And I'm going to try to get you, let's see. So we don't have any of the full screen. So what I'll do is I'll show you in just a second how to get that formula. So what we will do is we have, this is just saying on this page, we're loading this element here. Then we will make this full screen. All right, so for this, what we are going to be doing is we're going to go over to style, make sure everything looks good, and then layout. So when you select the component, this will populate. So we're looking at width and height. Right now, if we were to click it, I'll show you what it would look like. So on my device here, we'll go back and we will select Coffee Canine. So I don't have a link to it yet, so we'll have to add that shortly. So this is basically just going to show about this size in a mobile preview, which is not ideal. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to go to our home page and make sure everything can be linked so that we can see it all. So when you go to the home page, so we'll click on Coffee Canine, you'll see it just says welcome. So we need to put in a button that will link. So when you click on the button and you click the up arrow, we're going to bring over the open page and connect it. This way we can say when this button is clicked, I want to bring up, let's just say test and save. And then we'll bring over another button. And when you click on this one, and sometimes it can be a little slow, this one will bring up what we actually want to see. So this will bring up the web preview, and we'll click save and we'll save this. So now let's test it out real quick. This should update. This will bring up the web preview, and you'll see I have my channel open. However, it's cutting off a large portion of this bottom part of the page, which if that's what you want, then it works out well and you can kind of leave it as is. But what I want to do is I want to change it up a bit. So we're going to go over here and we're going to go to that web view. And I'll put this link in the description as well, but you'll notice here, it's a great example of how to use the Appgyver documentation. They give you a formula for the viewport height. So I'll show you what this is, but the idea here is it's showing you how to create something and make it a larger or full screen. So we're going to go to this web view component, minimize this, and we're going to go to width and height, and you can go to advanced. Now, I'm not quite sure exactly how this is intended to be used, but what I've been doing is I've been doing 100% for the minimum width, and for the max width, I've been pasting this, but you're going to need to change this to width. So the idea is the system variable dimension viewport width is basically saying make this the full width. So we'll click submit, and then we have to do the same for height. So for height, I've been putting it in as is, and then the max height we will paste in the same, and then we're going to click on save. And then when you click on this button, you'll see that it takes you to the web preview, and now we have something that's a bit more full screen. Now you do have the navigation bar down here. If that's something you don't like, you have the header bar and navigation menu. You can enable or disable those as you see fit. I like the navigation menu down here when you have a couple of items. To me, I think it looks good. But if you don't want it, you can enable or disable those here and add items to them. So this is the first option. So basically going back to the application, the idea here is if we are on our test page, so service 1 could take us to this new page. So this is choice 1. If you want to load a new page in your app that has this web preview, you just click it, bring up the logic, and change the page to your web page, and we'll click save. What I'm going to do next is the second option. So we're going to click on service 2, and then we are going to go to install, and then we're going to type in web. And then you'll see that we have open web browser, and we'll click install. And then we can now drag this flow function or this logic over and connect it. And then the web browser is going to take us to a specific URL. So that's where we would grab the URL itself, and I'll show you the difference with the two. So since I've already closed out of my channel, I will just go back to the web page, and we'll click on this component, and we will just copy this URL, and we'll jump back over to our test page. So service 2 is going to open a web browser with this URL, and we're going to click save. So if you remember, this first button here, although I didn't label them, takes us to this service page. So the first option is going to take us to the page that we created in the app, which is the web preview. So this is an individual page in our application with this URL. The second option is going to just open the web browser function. So you'll see it looks a little different. It doesn't say web up top with that page name, although that is the navigation header that I have enabled. So pretty similar functionality. It's entirely up to you, whatever works better and makes the most sense for you. Bear in mind with this option, you do not have the ability to cut off part of this page and add in more content down here. It is full screen. This is what you get. But if you decided I wanted a separate page in my app, like our web page that we have, just like we did before, instead of making it full screen, you could cut it off and have part of your web page there, and then the other part be more content from your application. So that's all that there is to that. So let's see what we've done up to this point. We have the home page. I walked you through how to set up this 3x3 layout. I showed you how to get the icons in, and I showed you how to get this set up. Like I said, each of these links to individual web pages on Fiverr. If you click on YouTube, each one of these will take you to a different YouTube channel, and it's the same concept as here. What I did is I used this function so I don't have to have 20 different web pages in my app, and then each one just opens a different URL. So that's all that there is to those. Next, we have professional. So this is probably the hardest one, although it's not incredibly difficult. it's at least worth noting that it's going to be a little trickier. So this is the one that I get the most questions on. So you will need to make sure that you're essentially paying attention to what we are doing here. So what we need to do is, to make this easier, we're going to go look at an example of how this functionality currently works. So we're going to jump over to Coffee Canine now. And then from this, we are going to go to, let's just say, forum and coffee roasting. So I want to show you an example of this in action, and then we'll do it together. So if we're in this page here, you have a couple of different options. So we are going to look for the coffee roasting forum, which is right here. And you'll see that we have all things roasting. So what happens is you have 3 fields and a button. Now, when you click the button, you can open the logic. This looks complicated, and we don't really need all of this, so I'm just going to cover this in case you need it. But what I did was I dragged over an if statement. So if we go to core and we scroll down, you'll see we have all of these different options, and there's an if condition here. So I dragged it over, and you just connect it. And the idea here is the if statement, all it says is right here, not in all caps, and then in parentheses is underscore empty, and then pagevar.name, and that's in parentheses. So this is basically saying if this is empty, what do we do? And I'm trying to set up logic to where each of these 3 fields are required. So you could do that, and then it'll say if it is empty, add name. If it's not empty, do the next if statement. The next if statement is the same, but it's for the description. So basically I'm making sure that when a user goes in, if they enter in a name, they need to have a description, and they need to have created by. If any of these are missing, it'll give them an error message, which is this toast. And basically it's just, if you scroll down, you're looking for the little toast dialog, which is this right here. And you drag it over and just connect it. Now we don't really need any of these. We're just looking for this HTTP request. So I'm going to walk you through how this works. So you'll see we have this URL here. So if we were to type this in to, let's just say in Google Chrome, so we're going to copy this real quick. I just want to show you what the web browser would return. So we have a sample post. Here's the name and the name. So that looks oddly familiar to what we've already done here in Firebase. So what we're trying to do is we need to have something set up for people to post to or from for this type of functionality. So we're going to go back to the Tyler Talks app real quick and just see what it is that we're looking for, because this content is different for everyone. So I don't need users to have the ability to post to this. I only need to have the ability to have this value repeat. So I'll show you what I mean, but I'm not going to add the post functionality. If you're looking to have users post content, check out the how to create a social or sharing playlist. There's a complex forum section that'll walk you through that setup. But all we need to do for this is essentially jump over here and create a new collection. We'll call this collection interview questions. And we'll click next. And the document ID, we're going to call it 1 because we want them to be in order. And we want this to be a repeating variable or repeating. So I'll show you how that works. So first is going to be the question name. The second will be, what is the other content that we had? Sample answer. So we'll put answer. And then this one is going to be to consider. So we're going to put name. And this is just the sample values. All right, and we're just going to click save. So now we are in this new field. So we can do a little bit of a cheat here. So I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm just grabbing this. And this is going to be a URL that you'll need. So I'll put this in the actual description as well. But this will look oddly familiar to what we've already done. So what we're going to do is we're going to go create the new data variable and add it to the page. So we're going to go back over to test and trying to think of the best way that we can all do this together. So the idea here is we want different questions. So at this point, we will just delete this content and we'll do it on this test page here. So repeating is a very interesting concept. The idea is every time that there is a document, it would be repeated. So 1, and then if we added 2, 3, 4, etc., it would repeat in our app. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to go to data, and we're going to copy the URL using the method I did before. So I'm just going to paste it up top, and then I'll copy this. Again, this will be in the description, but we're just creating a new one. So from scratch, following me, you're just going to go to data, add data resource, REST API. We will call this questions. Description, we're just going to call it questions again. We'll paste in the URL, and we're going to cut off directly after V1, and we'll paste that in here. And then instead of Best Coffee Brand Forum, we will simply call it Interview Questions. And then we have to put in documents here. Test, we'll run the test, and you'll see it came out correctly. And then we're going to set schema from response and save, just in case we need this content later. Now what we're going to do is we're going to drag over a container, and then we're going to try to make this look as close to the original as possible. And then we will put in a divider in the container. And then we're also going to add in text. So you'll see that we have, let's see, we may need to do this again just because it can look a little odd in the container sometimes. So the container is basically just your container with different components. And you can just put whatever in that container that you want. And then the divider helps us to differentiate between the different items. So now we have a container with text and a list divider. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to variables, data variables, and we're going to add one. And we're going to add in the most recent one. So if you remember, we just basically added in that new variable called questions, and we'll click save. Now we can access that content on this page. So we have the divider here in this container. So we have text. So we want this text to be, I'm sure you've guessed it, the question. So the idea is we're going to go to data variables, and you'll see down here, if we scroll, we have questions. And we're going to make this, you would create it as the question if you just want one, but we want to do something a little bit different. So we're going to click on container, and we're going to repeat with, and then we're going to repeat with data variables, and then you go to data variable, and you go to questions, and save. Now, don't get scared when this comes up and you see all the same repeated variables or content here. That's just how it looks in Appgyver. We'll click save. So what we're trying to do here is we've told Appgyver, all right, every time that there is a document, so this right here, I want there to be an additional container with text and a divider. So it allows it to have this repeated look. So we're going to follow along in the app, or in the Coffee Canine app now, just to make sure we're on the same page together. So you'll see here is the extra text, and then we'll just delete that to reduce confusion, and delete the list divider, and we'll click save. So right now, you're going to notice nothing really looks that different. Right here, we just have this text, and you don't see these because there's no value there. So that's not really anything to be concerned about. We can ignore this part right here. So again, the general idea is that's just Appgyver's way of showing us there's repeated content. So what we're going to do is we are going to select the text, which is up here, and again, make sure that you have this inside the container. It can be a little confusing since you can't see the bounds or the boundary of the container. But you have repeat with, we're avoiding that. We're going to go to content now because we have data item in repeat. So this is something that's new for binding. And then when you click on this, this looks a little messy, but this is how Appgyver has essentially developed the schema. So if you remember before when we clicked on the data variable, we clicked test and we clicked set schema from response. Appgyver basically said, oh, I see created time, I see an answer field, I see a string value, I see a name and a string value, and it's split up for us. So we can just click on this string value and click save, and we can click save here. And you'll see this text on this application, which we will need to click into, now says answer. Now, this looks a little, I mean, there's only one item here, but I want to show you an example. So we're going to add a new document. We're going to call it 2. And we're going to call this new question. And so you want these to be the same. So this is one thing to make a note of. Answer name to consider. This is really going to help you out. So we'll call this 2. Answer name to consider. The reason you want to keep these the same is when Appgyver sends or receives information, it's going to try to line things up. So we'll put, this is the value, so this is the actual content. So we can add something here. We'll put answer 2, name 2, and to consider 2. And we'll click save. Now this has been added here, and now you'll notice it just immediately populated over here. So now we have answer 1 and answer 2. If we were to add document 3 and put a couple of fields, so again, keep this consistent, so name, answer, to consider, and you can have as many fields as you need, just make sure that you're keeping the naming consistent. So we'll put answer 3 and to consider 3, and we'll click save, and you'll see it's been updated over here, but I didn't need to make any changes in Appgyver. So that's what I like about this Firebase setup. So what we're going to do now is we have this repeated variable set up correctly. Now we need to make these clickable, because if you notice when we click, nothing happens. So we are going to go make one final page, and we're just going to call it answer page. You may want to call it whatever it is that's relevant to you. And you have 3 items here. So we're going to set this up just like I did in the Tyler Talks app. So we're going to bring over a list divider and a list divider. And then we're going to center everything. So I'm going to go a little quickly here just to get this out of the way. So we center each specific item. And then what we did is we're going to need to create something that's new for us. So this is going to be a page parameter. A page parameter is basically something on the page that is content that comes from another page. So we are going to name this name, answer, and I'm sure you guessed it, to consider, because these are the variables I want to come through. Now, we want this to be the page parameter for name, and here's what this is going to do. So we're going to go to Formula, Page Parameters, Name, and what this is going to do is this allows us to only create one page, but that page has the content from Firebase. So when we go to Data Variables, our Page Parameters, we have Answer. And basically this is going to populate the name, answer, and to consider sections, but we only have to make one page for it. So it's probably one of my favorite features with Appgyver. And then to consider. So basically we've told the system, this is name, this is question, or this is the question, this is the answer, this is to consider. You can ignore the values that are in there because nothing populates until we tell it what to populate. So now we're basically wrapping up the application, and I'll kind of explain things from there, but we're going to go back to our test page. Now here, we click on the first data item in repeat, and we have to tell it what to do. So it's going to open the page, and then it is going to open up the answer page, and we'll click save. But you're going to notice we have these options here. These are the page parameters that you just set up. So we are going to click on this, and we can actually select data items in repeat, and you're going to be able to choose what value populates in that part of the page. So we're going to go to name, data item in repeat, and we're going to scroll down and find name. And then we're going to go to answer, data item in repeat, and we're going to scroll down and choose answer. And then we're going to lastly do the same thing for to consider. And the reason this has to be in a data in repeat is there's going to be different values. So we have document 1, 2, 3. So I want the name to be different for each of the items. So this is the easiest way to do it. So we're going to click on save. This will refresh over here. So this button will take us to this page. But now when we click on something, it brings us to name, answer, to consider. If we click on answer 2, name 2, answer 2, to consider 2, answer 3, exactly as you would essentially hope it would work, or exactly as you would expect it to work, I guess I should say. So every time we add in a new variable or a new document, so I'm going to call this new document 4, so it stays in order. We'll call it name 4, it works, and then we're going to put, we have to put name, answer, to consider. And then we'll click save, and it'll populate over here. So you'll see that's just the name, and when we click it, it works, and all the content displayed as we would expect. So this portion works, so we've covered this, and I'll walk you through exactly how and what we've done so far, and kind of put the pieces together. So we have services, which was the web preview, which we've already covered. We have the YouTube sections, which are just those list items that take you to different sections of my channel. We have professional, which has basically the flashcards when you click it. This is name, answer, and to consider. So you'll see how those data variables are in repeat. And then we have essentially walked through this part here. So we'll cover the last portion, which is these contact pages. So that's a pretty simple one to do. So for this, you can choose tons of different options. I'm just using Google Forms to keep it simple. So if you go to Google Forms and we click on Start a New Form, and then you can fill out the form and make it whatever you want. So we'll put request, form description, and then you can put in all the questions that you need here. So question 1, you can choose the choices, etc. When you're done with this, you can name it. So we'll just put name. And then you have the option to send. So what you can do here is we can go to this hyperlink. You can copy the hyperlink. And I'm sure you've guessed at this point what we're going to do. So we're going to start overriding what we've done previously just to make this a little bit more simple. So we're just going to have this one here, which is the one that opens up our web browser. We're just going to copy this functionality. So instead of it taking us to our YouTube channel, we're going to have it take us to this new form. So we will go back to the Coffee Canine app, and then we're going to click on button, which takes us to this test page. And now when we click on this, it takes us to this new form. So the form that we just entered. So that's really as simple as it is for the web preview. It makes it a lot easier. So let's walk through and see if there's anything that we have missed. So we've covered the top 3. Contact Us is a form. Technology is more opening web previews. This is a form as well. This is more web previews. This is web previews once more. And then this is web previews with the contact form, but without making the form full screen. And then lastly, this is the Tyler Talks About Us page. And again, these are data variables, so you could set these up. I'm sure you remember at this point, so we've already covered this. But basically all there is to it is you would simply drag over text. So we could just drag this here. And you would make the content your data variable for that section of the application. So the idea here is you go to data variables, choose the string value for your variable, and that content would be saved. So that's really all that there is to it. So the idea here, again, these items, these images, were stored in Firebase's database, and I linked the URL, so the application renders it. Their size is also stored in Firebase. That way I can change sizes without accessing Appgyver. And then we have tons of different options, web previews, data items in repeat. Now, if you want people to have access to right to the database, you need to consider security rules, policies, and all that other stuff, but I do lightly touch on that in the how to create a social or sharing app playlist on my channel, so you can check that out. And again, by the time you're viewing this video, it's probably going to be, this app will probably be live in Google Play and the Apple App Store, so check it out. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment box below or use the forms in this application, and I will see you all in the next video.